Well, let's talk to Nigel Farage about that right now. Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage, good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. As Andrea has just been pointing out, there was a lot of criticism of you when you were first actually pointing out that there was this issue. We now know that more than 4,000 migrants have reached the UK this year by crossing the English Channel in small boats, more than 650 so far this month alone. Or seems to me, though, those figures are possibly just the tip of the iceberg because they're the only ones we know about. How did you first pick up on this story, and why did you think it was so important at a time when we're dealing with a pandemic, dealing with the economic fallout of that pandemic, that it was so important to raise?
Well, what was extraordinary was that it was clear, going back to March and April this year, that the numbers coming were increasing at a very rapid rate. Two key reasons for that. The traffickers have two big selling points. Number one is that almost nobody who comes into Britain illegally, even when their asylum claim fails, gets returned to France or anywhere else. But secondly, what I understood and what I knew was that the traffickers were using Brexit as their big selling ticket. They're saying to people, by the end of this year, the transition period's over. The UK will be outside of EU rules. It might be really tough in 2021 to get to Britain, so you better do it now. Now, I understood those things, and I predicted that there'd be a summer invasion, which I think is to a large extent happening. What I didn't know when I first started this investigation, what I didn't fully understand, was that despite giving the French at least £60 million over the last few years to stop this problem, that the French Navy was literally acting as an escort to boats, taking them across the line into British waters, and then that our border force, and even our RNLI then act as a taxi service, bringing people back into British waters. So, Julia, the more I realised that what was going on was a scandal, the more I wanted to expose it. And to begin with, I was getting millions of people viewing my films online. Mainstream media wouldn't touch it, but at least now they are.
Yeah, absolutely. I know my colleague Mike Graham was absolutely one of the first to tackle this. This is the thing, that immediately there were attacks on you, as I say, the shooting of the messenger. But again, there are lots of different aspects to this. This is not just a total failure, abject failure of a government that elected to protect our borders, failing to protect our borders. A lot of tough talk, not much actual tough action. There's also the question mark about what these people are going to do when they get to the UK. We don't know. We don't know whether or not they're going to be, they could be, human slavery. They may well be victims of human slavery. We can't tackle that if these people are coming in, turning to crime, working illegally, and of course claiming benefits as well, whether they seek asylum or not. As you say, impossible to be deported once they reach our country. But also the threat of terrorism. We know that there are thousands of ISIS supporters who have left Syria and Iraq, who are been going across Europe. We've been told this time and again, and apparently they basically got a free pass to come to this country using the dinghy boat service.
You see, I mean, if I watch the television broadcasters, I would believe that everyone that comes is a vulnerable pregnant woman, who's come from horrible oppression. And I've no doubt there are some people who come who genuinely are getting away from very bad situations. But 85% of those that come are young men between the ages of 18 and 26, and the chances of them fully integrating, not just into our society, but into our value system in this country, that to begin with is difficult. And secondly, have a look at what's happened with those that came across the Mediterranean. Have a look at what's happened in Malmo. Have a look at what's happened in certain German cities, in certain French cities, and you realise this is an issue of national security. What is happening at the moment is the government effectively is paying for hotels all over the country to be filled up with those that come across the channel. And I even had an example last week of a hotel where one of the illegal migrants was removed because he was attempting to radicalise the others. This is very serious, and yet anyone that dares to say that is accused of prejudice. It's a very real issue, and I would remind your listeners of this one horrifying fact. Of the 8 men that committed those awful barbarities in Paris a few years ago, 5 of the 8 got into France by coming in boats across the Mediterranean. So we really do need to take this very seriously.
And what do you make of the Home Secretary Priti Patel appointing this former National Crime Agency executive, Dan Mahoney, as the UK's wonderful title, this clandestine channel threat commander? Do you have any hopes that the government is getting to grips with this now?
It sounds good. I mean, just as last August, when Boris Johnson said those who come across the Channel are illegal migrants, will be treated as such and returned to France. And just as it sounded good last October when Priti Patel told us that by spring the whole thing would have stopped. And here we have this response. We've got the Navy going to be involved and this clandestine boss. Look, the fact is, right now, as we speak, in the Channel, we have a big British drone going up and down the Channel. We have a British spotter plane going up and down the Channel. We have border force vessels in the Channel. We have the lifeboats from Dover and Dungeness in the Channel. There is a massive operation going on every day. If you add the Royal Navy to it, all you'll do is make it a bigger taxi service unless you have the political will to change how we're doing this.
Do you think the government does have the political will?
No, I don't. I absolutely don't. I think Priti Patel herself may well have the will, but I don't think Boris Johnson and the Cabinet are prepared to do what it takes and to face the criticism that they'll get. Look, when Tony Abbott was Prime Minister of Australia, or I'm talking about 10 years ago now, they faced a very similar problem. Boats coming from Indonesia. Larger distances, bigger boats, larger numbers of people, but the same principle, all right? In the end, what Abbott said was that nobody that enters Australia illegally by boat will ever be given refugee status. And if the British government said that, and if we return those that do continue to come illegally, the problem would stop.
What would you say to people who, social media are awash with these folk, and indeed the mainstream media, you say, look, this is very heartless. We are talking about people who are desperate, people who are fleeing persecution, fleeing, even if economic migrants, fleeing destitution. They're desperate to come to this people. What are you planning to do? Just leave them to drown in the Channel? Turning boats back could actually lead to loss of life. What do you say to those people?
No. The drownings in the Mediterranean, and we've only had one so far in the Channel, which is a miracle. But the drownings happen because people are encouraged to come, because they know as soon as they set foot on the soil in Dover, they will not be taken anywhere apart from going to a 4-star hotel, getting free healthcare, dental care, and 40 quid a week spending money. That's the reality of where we are. The pull factors are absolutely huge. In France, they would get virtually nothing. We are extraordinarily generous. And look, we've got a big history in this country of looking after genuine refugees, be they French Huguenots, be they Jewish people, be they people from, indeed, Priti Patel's own family, who, of course, came here from Uganda. The vast majority of these young men that are coming do not qualify for refugee status under any definition going back to the 1951 Geneva Convention. They are economic migrants. And yeah, sure, some of the countries they come from may not be great countries, but we can't open our doors to the entire world.
And just finally, the French authorities apparently have asked for another £30 million to help police this issue and to take this issue on. Would that be money well spent, though? If you're a Brexiteer, I'm a Brexiteer. If we have to rely on the French, and it may well be that come January the 1st next year, after the end of the transition period, they may not be quite as willing to help. Is that £30 million well spent?
What, £30 million so that the French Navy can continue to escort illegal migrant vessels out of their waters into our waters? Absolutely not. Money is not the solution. We have gone on year after year giving France more money. I exposed what's called the handover. The French Navy literally taking the boats over the line and then being picked up by UK border force or lifeboats. And until that practice ends, we shouldn't consider sending them a penny.
Even if there is loss of life?
Well, there'll be no loss of life if the boats stop coming. And the boats will stop coming if people know that entering Britain illegally means they won't be allowed to stay. It really is As simple as that. And so it's down to political will. And everything else, even if you put the entire Royal Navy, or what's left of it, in the British Channel, and even if you did start stopping boats, all that would happen then is they'd come under cover of darkness. There needs to be a political solution. And actually, it would suit the French too, because if they knew getting into Britain wouldn't be allowed, the Camp of Calais would stop as well.
Nigel Farage, Brexit Party leader, thank you very much indeed for joining me.